Nothing is on. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Susan Reyna, and I'm here today with Luis Valadez from Chicago Public Schools, Chicago HOPES Program. And Luis, you can talk about that in a little bit. I represent Beacon Therapeutic. We're a not-for-profit organization located in the Beverly community. Just a little bit of background on Beacon. We've been around since 1968. Started off as a therapeutic day school for children, and then have branched out since then to provide mobile mental health services to homeless women and children. We have 4 different locations. We have our business office that's located in Beverly, 1912 West 103rd. We have our Longwood campus that houses our elementary school program, our outpatient clinic, and our big and little intensive outpatient programs at 10650 South Longwood. Our homeless outreach services that works with homeless women and children throughout the city of Chicago, delivering mobile mental health services to 27 homeless shelters, is located on Western Avenue. And then we have our high school program at 124th and Ada. And at that location, we also have our autism program that you'll be hearing a bit more about next week in next week's show. I'm very happy today to have Luis with us today. Luis, maybe you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Susan. It's wonderful to be here. So yes, my name is Luis Valadez, and I work for the Chicago Public Schools Students in Temporary Living Situation Program as part of the Chicago HOPES Initiative. What Students in Temporary Living Situations is, or STLS as we like to call it, is the program within CPS that upholds the rights of students who are homeless or living in some other kind of temporary unstable living situation. And it also provides them with services to make sure that they're able to maintain their educations while they're experiencing this situation of uncertainty. What Chicago HOPES is an initiative of the program that's actually an after-school tutoring and arts program that is provided in homeless shelters for the school-age students who live there. And the aim with Chicago HOPES is to provide these students with opportunities they wouldn't get otherwise, to give them a safe space for learning, to stay focused on their education while they're living in the shelter environment, and to provide them with caring adults who are there solely to see them succeed.
I'm going to put actually your website information on. Tell me a little bit about how did the program get going? Because I think, and how is it staffed? I'm really intrigued. I think that's what's one of the really neat pieces of the program as well.
So Chicago HOPES was actually started in 2006 by the former director of STLS, which at the time was called the Homeless Education Program, Patricia Rivera, who was a lifelong social worker who just in her time working with homeless students, working in schools, she had noticed that there was a lot of programming out there in shelters for adults to get them on their feet, education, job training, things of this nature. But there were all these children in shelters who didn't really have a lot going on for them. Some of the shelters were trying to do things with their staff, but there really wasn't any dedicated program for school-age students who were living in family shelters. And so with that, she decided to start the Chicago HOPES program. She did that at first by getting AmeriCorps Vista volunteers to staff the program.
And that's how they got you, right?
And that is exactly how they got me.
Okay,
That's how I came along in 2008. And Vista's really built the program from the ground up. And that lasted until 2011 when the Vista grant for the program ended, but actually we continue to thrive as a volunteer-based program, and so many of the people who coordinate sites for us, who are our tutors, are volunteers, either through internships or through just people who just really want to help. So.
And then I know, so you're in the shelters, you're providing these services. And so then, and I know it's a core group of folks, you're one of them,
Yeah.
and there's a few other core group, but then you also accept volunteers from the community, right? Anybody
Yes.
who's interested in helping. How do people access that if they want to volunteer for your program?
So people can access volunteer opportunities with us through our website. Just
Okay, and I'm going to put it on.
All right. Just go to www.chicagohopes.org and click on the volunteer tab. We do volunteer training at the beginning of each semester, so we're on the tail end of the fall semester, and we're about to start our spring recruitment. So volunteer trainings will be posted. All we ask from our volunteers is that they go through the training, have at least a high school diploma or GED, and are willing to make a commitment to one session a week for the duration of our semester, which is anywhere between 12 to 15 weeks.
I think what's so telling, and clearly we got involved with Pat Rivera and our extensive homeless family work. And I think what Pat discovered is, I think what we discovered and what led us to start working with homeless families is particularly when we were providing services to our students in the day school. And then we were going into the homeless shelters, and that's when we discovered there was this growing number of homeless families. And so we've been delivering the mental health services, but I think it's great to see that, you know, your services have been delivered in there. Now, within Chicago Public Schools, I know the numbers are staggering, you know, and we talk about, and I've mentioned this in shows in the past, there's different ways of counting the homeless, unfortunately. Within the folks that are residing in homeless shelters are counted one way. But then I know Chicago Public Schools counts children in temporary living situations, as they are called now, very differently. What are the numbers in Chicago Public School right now?
So as of last year, at the end of the 10-11 school year, our numbers were 15,580 students we had identified as qualifying for our program. And it's kind of a rule with us that for every student that we're able to identify, we assume that there might be one or two that we aren't able to.
Wow.
So.
And then this, and I know how it just goes procedurally, is that you look for kids to self-identify, right? They fill out the forms, and then they can. How does someone enroll in the program?
So yes, the most direct way to be enrolled in the Students in Temporary Living Situations program is for either if you are an unaccompanied youth who doesn't have a parent with them, or if you are a parent of a child and you're in a temporary living situation, to go to your school. Every school in CPS has a STLS clerk or liaison who works with the program. Ask for them. You can easily just say, may I see the STLS clerk or liaison, and let them know what your situation is, the situation that you're in, that you want to enroll in school. It's their job to get you enrolled in school, get you enrolled in our program, and to take you through the list of different services we could possibly provide for you to help you stay at that school and to help you stay in school. It is a confidential process as well, so you don't have to worry about sort of outing your situation.
And I know the whole concept of what is, and I know we've been working together for so long that when we worked with the CPS program, it was a homeless education program.
Yeah.
So now it's students in temporary living, and I know that was a very thoughtful switch because it was recognizing that a lot of families aren't necessarily in homeless shelters.
Absolutely.
Or they're not sleeping in the streets, but they're, you know, living with the auntie, or they're living with the cousins, or they're couch surfing. So essentially the categorization is that they're not the leaseholder, right? Or
Absolutely,
it's that their housing can change, you know, within the next week. So right now that, you know, they may stay with the sister, but at some point the sister is going to tell them to leave. So it's anybody that falls within that category. So hence it's temporary living situation. And what kind of services are they able to get through STLS? Because I know we can talk a little bit about some of the trainings, but I know there's some really neat stuff that goes on. So what are some of the things that they're able to get once they enroll?
So on the base level, a big thing that we provide is advocacy for enrollment and immediate enrollment. So say you're in a situation where you've been uprooted, either you've been evicted or your house caught on fire. You don't have things like proof of address, proof of immunization, things of this nature. And so what we ensure is that when you go to the school that you need to enroll in, whether it be the school that you've always been in, and that may now be outside of your attendance area because you moved in with your aunt or you moved into a shelter, or whether it be a new school in a new attendance area because you've been uprooted, that you're able to enroll in that school without those pieces of information. That doesn't mean that you'll never have to get them, but it's actually the clerk or liaison's job at the school to help you obtain them. But what we don't want is for kids to be left out of school for any length of time because they're trying to track down their birth certificate or proof of immunization, something of that nature. In addition to that, then what we do is make sure that all of our students are getting free school uniforms if they need them, that they're getting school supplies. If they need transportation, again, say you want to, our goal is to keep kids stable in their education. So if you did have to be uprooted, we don't want you to have to transfer to a new school. We want you to stay in the school you've always been in. But if that means then that you need transportation because you either live outside of the attendance area if you're in elementary school, or you're more than 1.5 miles away if you're in high school, we will provide you with transportation to get to and from school, either by way of CTA cards, which are given to parents and students if those students are in 6th grade or younger, or by way of hardship transportation if for some reason that parent cannot accompany the child to school on the CTA because either they have another child that they need to get to school or they have a job that they need to get to. And what that hardship transportation is a yellow school bus that'll pick up those students and take them to and from school. Then of course for high school age students, they get CTA cards to go on their own.
And so that these are all the resources that can be accessed through the STLS worker.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other big one I forgot to mention is that we make sure that school fees are waived for our students.
Okay, like
so
like the field trip fees and all those kinds of things for these kids.
The goal of the program is that our kids' education be stabilized. If there is an 8th grade class trip, we want you to go on that 8th grade class trip, you know. We want you to get your gym uniform. We want things of this nature for you. So.
That's great. And I think, recognizing the tremendous impact of unstable living on children and the traumas and, the stigma associated with it. I think clearly it sounds like your initiative really works to alleviate a lot of those things, which is so important.
Absolutely.
What are some of the other traumas that you feel that you've seen as a result of children in these in the temporary living situations?
So one thing I like to emphasize before I kind of get into this is that especially in this day and age with the economy the way it is, what we find is that homelessness or being in a temporary living situation is something that is vastly transcending class, learning levels, things of this nature. So it's really difficult for us to point at a student and say, we can identify this as a homeless student or a student in a temporary living situation. The things that we look at objectively that help us determine that are things like our kids are frequently transferring schools, they're falling asleep in class, they're coming to school hungry, so they're hoarding food from lunch, things of this nature. Some of the things I've seen personally with our kids, what I find is that our kids are really just wanting to be kids. And one of the things that's great about the Chicago Hopes experience for me is that because we're in a shelter, we're in this context that is really not necessarily kind of normalized, for students. You're living, depending on the shelter facility, it could be a shelter where everybody has their own room, or it could be a shelter where you have 6 families to a room. And that can be very stressful. And so what we do with Chicago Hopes is we provide that safe space. We give these kids a little kind of space outside of the shelter to be kids in, and what we find is that they really thrive there. And when they get back to the shelter, they might have to go back to the other situation that they're in. And so what I see a lot of is our kids just really, really wanting to be kids again.
Yeah, and I think that clearly parallels what we try to tap into at Beacon in terms of trying to provide the families with as regular of an experience as possible. And that's what you're describing.
Yeah.
Being around maybe other adults, being able to be kids, and then hopefully that experience containing them and helping them when they go back to the realities of what they're dealing with at that moment. One thing that I know, there's been a lot of trainings. We've done some collaborative trainings, which has been a great opportunity for us. And I know with our other partner, Heartland, you've really done quite a number of trainings. Tell me about some of those trainings, because I think they're great in terms of increasing awareness on the needs of homeless youth, but also training providers. So what are some of the trainings that are going on?
Absolutely. And so before I get into that, it's good to speak of our experience, and I think anybody out there who, I think you can relate to this, other people who are in this field can relate to this, is, we have a very kind of specialized service we provide for our students in regard to supporting them educationally. But we realize that, that's just one of many things that our students need. They're whole human beings. They're not just students. They're human beings who have all sorts of needs. And so working with other organizations to do things like cross-training. All this is a big push for us in the last year or so, both at STLS and with Chicago Hopes. And so actually on Friday, we just had what was our second collaborative training together, which was called Social Issues Affecting Homeless Students, which was a follow-up to the first training we had over the summer, which was supporting homeless students. What supporting homeless students, what we're really trying to do is bring together educators, namely a lot of our STLS clerks and liaisons, with service providers, because we get those phone calls from our clerks and liaisons. They want to help our kids. They want to do things like help them find counseling services or food services or things of this nature, but they don't know where to go. And so we wanted to bring everybody into a room together to talk about, we're all helping these kids in different ways. How do we work together to serve these kids more holistically? And so in that's what compelled us into the second conference, which was the idea was to examine some more specific issues that our students face, for which serving them could be more of a nuanced process. Like if you are a student who has special education needs, if you are a student who happens to be in the LGBTQ community, if you're a pregnant homeless student, how do we serve you when we know that you not having a permanent address makes things that much more difficult for you and for us to serve you? And so that is what we did on Friday, and we're hoping to follow it up again in the spring.
No, it was. We were part of both of them. It was clearly very well attended. Questions were really, on the spot. We do have a caller. Caller, your question? Hello.
Yes, I'm wondering if the larger community can help with resources. What are some type of things you need?
It's a good question. And I think we get this question asked often, and I think, some of the things that you were describing in terms of a lot of these families just have very basic needs.
Absolutely.
And so, Beacon is always accepting donations, like we accept school supplies, backpacks, school uniforms. And I know we always do a big push right in the beginning of the year in terms of our development director is great because she always wants to have all the kids go to school with brand new stuff, like new socks, new T-shirts, and yes, new underwear, like all the stuff that kids get. But I think those kinds of donations are things that are really meaningful. And, you're describing trying to normalize experiences. And I think so Beacon is always willing to accept those donations. I think that helps us significantly. How do people help your program? What kind of support from the community do you look for in your program, Luis?
So those are very, very important things, some of those basic things. A big thing that people don't think a lot about when donating is actually hygiene products, and in particular feminine hygiene products, because these are just aren't products or things that are normally donated to students. And our students, especially when they're becoming into adolescence and such, they want deodorant, they want to be able to comb their hair, they want things of this nature, they want that normalized experience. And so when it comes to donations, either through Chicago Hopes or for the STLS program, we do work very closely together to get those donations out there. You can go to our website at www.chicopes.org and look at our donate page, and there's information on who you can contact about if you have donations like that, in-kind donations that you want to submit. We make sure that they get to our students.
Yeah, I think those are really important, and I think you bring up a good point. It's the early one as well. These are regular kids. They have regular needs, and clearly they don't want to be viewed any differently.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you've ever seen, there was a film that was done a while back ago, and I think they showed it on 60 Minutes. It's called Shelter Boy. And it really was profiling a young boy who was in the shelter system in New York, and all it talked about is him wanting to be like a regular kid and trying to keep his homeless status from his peers, and how things were so important, having his space. And I think that's something that we're really talking about, is trying to create as normal as an existence as possible for these kids, because that is really so important for them to alleviate some of the traumas of homelessness.
Absolutely.
What would you say are some of the biggest challenges in the work that you're doing?
So for us, it really is that our students are as transient as they are. This is why we really, really we try to emphasize as much as possible to our parents, please keep your student in the school that they've been in. There are services to make sure that can be an easier thing to do. Do not transfer your students. What happens with Chicago Hopes is that, we'll have a student for a month or two, we'll get very close, and the next thing you know, they're just gone without any notice. And we used the Chicago Hopes platform to get a lot of other sort of services and programs into shelters. And so as recently as last year, we had a group of students from Loyola who were working on a study, and part of what they were doing was evaluating students who were in the shelter who may have needed an IEP. And we were
Dr.
actually,
Wynn. Yeah.
yes, with Dr. Wynn, and
yeah.
we were actually right on the cusp of getting one of our students an IEP, and then they just moved.
Yeah.
And we couldn't locate them after that. And so that's a big challenge for us.
And I think it was, and I know that was one of the sessions that I was a part of at the training this past Friday, is really emphasizing that, any of those services that those students had prior to becoming homeless, it's the parents' right to really insist that they continue to receive those services. Yeah. And again, recognizing, understanding what we know about the impact of homelessness on kids and the academic delays that they show because of all these repeated changes. It's so important to keep those services intact. And many times to have a parent try to advocate for their child when they're not sure where they're going to spend the night, or they're worried about, are they feeding their children properly, or how are they going to get to school. I think it's a real burden. So hence the advocacy that an STLS worker can do is really important. But it's also helping navigate the system, not only for the school system, but also you're describing other resources. Now, in terms of other partners that you work with, I know you've worked with Beacon in terms of the trainings and so on. Who are some of the other partners that you've worked with?
Well, with Chicago Hopes, we've been able to bring in a lot of great programming for the kids who are in the shelters, from places like Mad Science, the Chicago Children's Museum. We've got a lot of great organizations donate field trips to us. In fact, we'll be taking our kids on a field trip to the Merle Ruskins Theater in a couple of weeks to see a production of The Witches, which the tickets were donated to us by the theater.
How many kids are able to take to something like that? I mean, that's wonderful. It's a great experience.
So this particular trip, I think we're going to take about 15, but we've been able to take as much as 120 kids on trips before. We have kind of a working philosophy there. Whatever it is you have to offer our students, they'll take it, we'll take it. I like to always say, if you know how to basket weave, we'll do a basket weaving workshop.
I'll sign up.
Our kids will love it, and we'll love it too.
Well, no, and I think that's what's so neat, and I think that's what I really enjoy working with your organization, your group, because you guys are all so full of energy, and you all have fascinating backgrounds. I mean, I know, okay, so you were an Vista worker, and I know in your future you're thinking of the Peace Corps.
Yes.
So how did you get, I know we're kind of running out of time, but quickly tell me, how did you get involved with this work?
So I was looking to work with students. I was looking to do... My ultimate trajectory, I think, is my background's in creative writing, and I really enjoy using the tool of creative writing and performance to empower students, to help them develop their voices. And actually through Chicago Hopes, I've been able to do a number of creative writing workshops in the shelters with our kids, and it's just amazing what you can get out of a kindergartner in terms of poetry and performance. You
guys should do a book. You thought of that?
Actually, yes, we have.
You should do that. You should definitely do that, yeah.
And so, yes, this program, working with Chicago Hopes, working with what was HEP at the time, appealed to me because I saw a populace that was vulnerable, and a populace that needed a voice, that needed to help be able to cultivate its own voice, advocate for itself. So that's carried me through these last 3 years or so.
Well, and apparently you're thinking of the Peace Corps or something, right?
Yes, yes, I am.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think, it'd be a real loss, and at some point in the future, maybe you can tell us about that. We're kind of running out of time at this point, and I just wanted to get back to a few Beacon things as well. We've been representing Beacon Therapeutic. I'm here with Luis Valadez from Chicago Hopes. It's been a live call-in show. We have a few minutes left. I did want to talk a little bit about next week's show. We are going to be having a specialist on autism. One of our Beacon's program is an autism program that we're very excited about. Also wanted to let folks know that we do have an event coming up at Beacon Therapeutic. It's our 19th annual holiday supper. And it's at our Longwood facility. If you're interested, please, you can purchase tickets. Contact Peggy Rourke at 298-6441 or P. Rourke at beacon-therapeutic.org. Luis, we have about a minute left. Any final words, any final thoughts? And close the show out.
Yes. So for anyone who's out there who might be working with a family who's in a temporary living situation, please just let them know that the STLS program exists, that there are services for those students on the school level to make sure they keep in school. And please let them know that the time to address educational issues for their kids is now. Don't wait until you get housed. Don't wait until this or that. I know it's really hard to think about that when you're in crisis, but the ultimate goal is to keep the students stable. So.
And I think that's what your program is doing wonderfully. So thank you very much for being on the show today.
Thank you.
It's been great. It's a wonderful pleasure to be able to work with you guys. I love all your energy. So thank you very much. And that's the end of our show. Thank you.